The fourth book of Homer's Iliads. The argument. The gods in council, at last, decree the famous Ilion shall expunged be, and that their own continued faults may prove the reasons that have so incensed Jove. Minerva seeks, with more offences done against the lately injured Atreus' son, a ground that clearest would make seen their sin, to have the Lycian Pandarus begin. He, 'gainst the truce, with sacred covenants bound, gives Menelaus a dishonoured wound. Machaon heals him. Agamemnon then to mortal war incenseth all his men. The battles join, and in the heat of fight, cold death shuts many eyes in endless night. Another argument. In Delta is the gods' assize, the truce is broke, wars freshly rise. Within the fair paved court of Jove, he and the gods confer about the sad events of Troy, amongst whom ministered blessed Hebe Nectar. As they sat and did Troy's towers behold, they drank and pledged each other round in full-crowned cups of gold. The mirth at whose feast was begun by great Saturnides, in urging a begun dislike among the goddesses, but chiefly in his solemn queen, whose spleen he was disposed to tempt yet further, knowing well what anger it enclosed, and how wives' angers should be used. On which, thus pleased, he played. Two goddesses there are that still give Menelaus aid, and one that Paris loves, the two that sit from us so far, which Argive Juno is, and she that rules in deeds of war, no doubt are pleased to see how well the late seen fight did frame. And yet upon the adverse part, the laughter-loving dame made her power good too for her friend, for, though he were so near the stroke of death, in the other's hopes, she took him from them clear. The conquest yet is questionless the martial Spartan king's. We must consult then what events shall crown these future things. If wars and combats, we shall still with even successes strike, or as impartial friendship plant on both parts. If ye like the last, and that it will as well delight as merely please your happy deities, still let stand old Priam's town in peace, and let the Lacedaemon king again his queen enjoy. As Pallas and Heaven's queen sat close, complotting ill to Troy, with silent murmurs they received this ill-like choice from Jove, 'gainst whom was Pallas much incensed, because the Queen of Love could not, without his leave, relieve in that late point of death the son of Priam, whom she loathed. Her wrath yet fought beneath her supreme wisdom, and was curbed, but Juno needs must ease her great heart with her ready tongue, and said, "What words are these, austere, and too much Saturn's son? Why wouldst thou render still my labours idle, and the sweat of my industrious will dishonour with so little power? My chariot horse are tired with posting to and fro from Greece, and bringing banes desired to people mustering Priamus and his perfidious sons. Yet thou protectst, and join'st with them whom each just deity shuns. Go on, but ever go resolved all other gods have vowed to cross thy partial course for Troy in all that makes it proud." At this the cloud-compelling Jove a far-fetched sigh let fly, and said, "Thou fury, what offence of such impiety hath Priam or his sons done thee, that with so high a hate thou shouldst thus ceaselessly desire to raze and ruinate so well a builded town as Troy? I think, hadst thou the power, thou wouldst the ports and far-stretched walls fly over, and devour old Priam and his issue quick, and make all Troy thy feast. And then at length I hope thy wrath and tired spleen would rest, to which run on thy chariot, that not be found in me of just cause to our future jars. In this yet strengthen thee, and fix it in thy memory fast, This if I entertain as peremptory a desire to level with the plain a city where thy loved live, stand not twixt my ire and what it aims at, but give way when thou hast thy desire, which now I grant thee willingly, although against my will. For not beneath the ample sun and heaven's star-bearing hill there is a town of earthy men so honored in my mind as sacred Troy, nor of earth's kings is Priam and his kind, who never let my altars lack rich feast of offerings slain and their sweet savours, for which grace I honored them again. Dread Juno, with the cow's fair eyes, replied, 3 towns there are of great and eminent respect, both in my love and care, Mycenae with the broad highways, and Argos rich in horse, and Sparta, all which 3 destroy, when thou enviest their force. I will not aid them, nor malign thy free and sovereign will, for if I should be envious, and set against their ill, I know my envy were in vain, since thou art mightier far. But we must give each other leave, and wink at either's war. I likewise must have power to crown my works with wished end, because I am a deity, and did from thence descend whence thou thyself, and the elder born, wise Saturn was our sire, and thus there is a 2-fold cause that pleads for my desire. Being sister, and am called thy wife, and more, since thy command rules all gods else, I claim therein a superior hand. All wrath before then now remit, and mutually combine in either's empire, I thy rule, and thou illustrate mine. So will the other gods agree, and we shall all be strong. And first, for this late plot, with speed let Pallas go among the Trojans, and some one of them entice to break the truce, by offering in some treacherous wound the honored Greeks abuse. The father of both men and gods agreed, and Pallas sent with these winged words to both the hosts. Make all haste, and invent some mean by which the men of Troy, against the truce agreed, may stir the glorious Greeks to arms with some inglorious deed. Thus charged he her with haste that did before in haste abound, who cast herself from all the heights with which steep heaven is crowned. And as Jove, brandishing a star, which men a comet call, hurls out his curled hair abroad, that from his brand exhales 1,000 sparks to fleets at sea, and every mighty host of all presages and ill haps assign mistrusted most. So Pallas fell twixt both the camps, and suddenly was lost, when through the breasts of all that saw she struck a strong amaze with viewing, in her whole descent, her bright and ominous blaze. When straight one to another turned and said, Now thundering Jove, great arbiter of peace and arms, will either stablish love amongst our nations, or renew such war as never was. Thus either army did presage when Pallas made her pass amongst the multitude of Troy, who now put on the grace of brave Laodocus, the flower of old Antenor's race, and sought for Lycian Pandarus, a man that being bred out of a faithless family, she thought was fit to shed the blood of any innocent, and break the covenant sworn. He was Lycaon's son, whom Jove into a wolf did turn for sacrificing of a child, and yet in arms renowned as one that was inculpable. Him Pallas standing found, and round about him his strong troops that bore the shady shields. He brought them from Aesopus' flood, let through the Lycian fields, whom standing near she whispered thus, Lycaon's warlike son, shall I despair at thy kind hands to have a favour done? Nor darest thou let an arrow fly upon the Spartan king? It would be such a grace to Troy, and such a glorious thing, that every man would give his gift, but Alexander's hand would load thee with him, if he could discover from his stand his foe's pride struck down with thy shaft, and he himself ascend the flaming heap of funeral. Come, shoot him, princely friend. But first invoke the god of light, that in thy land was born, and is in archer's art the best that ever sheaf hath worn. To whom 100 first-ewed lambs vow thou in holy fire, when safe to sacred Zelia's towers thy zealous steps retire. With this the mad, gift-greedy man Minerva did persuade, who instantly drew forth a bow most admirably made of the antler of a jumping goat bred in a steep upland, which, archer-like, as long before he took his hidden stand, the Evaceat, skipping from a rock, into the breast he smote, and headlong felled him from his cliff. The forehead of the goat held out a wondrous goodly palm, that 16 branches brought, of all which joined an useful bow a skilful bowyer wrought, which picked and polished, both the ends he hid with horns of gold, and his bow, bent, he close laid down, and bade his soldiers hold their shields before him, lest the Greeks, discerning him, should rise in tumults ere the Spartan king could be his arrow's prize. Mean space with all his care he choosed, and from his quiver drew an arrow, feathered best for flight, and yet that never flew, strong-headed and most apt to pierce. Then took he up his bow, and knocked his shaft the ground whence all their future grief did grow. When praying to his god the sun, that was in Lycia bred, and king of archers, promising that he the blood would shed of full 100 first-fallen lambs, all offered to his name. When to Zelia's sacred walls from rescued Troy he came, he took his arrow by the nock, and to his bended breast the oxy sinew close he drew, even till the pile did rest upon the bosom of the bow, and as that savage prize his strength constrained into an orb, as if the wind did rise, the coming of it made a noise. The sinew-forged string did give a mighty twang, and forth the eager shaft did sing, affecting speediness of flight amongst the archived throng. Nor were the blessed heavenly powers unmindful of thy wrong, O Menelaus, but in chief Jove's seed, the pillager, stood close by, and slacked the force the arrow did confer, with as much care and little hurt as doth a mother use, and keep off from her babe when sleep doth through his powers diffuse his golden humour, and the assaults of rude and busy flies she still checks with her careful hand. For so the shaft she plies that on the buttons made of gold, which made his girdle fast, and where his curate's double were, the fall of it she placed. And thus much proof she put it to, the buckle made of gold, the belt it fastened, bravely wrought, his curate's double fold, and last the charmed plate he wore, which helped him more than all, and 'gainst all darts and shafts bestowed, was to his life a wall. So through all these the upper skin the head did only race, yet forth the blood flowed, which did much his royal person grace, and showed upon his ivory skin, as doth a purple dye laid by a dame of Caira or lovely Meone, on ivory, wrought in ornaments to deck the cheeks of horse, which in her marriage room must lie, whose beauties have such force that they are wished of many knights, but are such precious things that they are kept for horse that draw the chariots of kings, which horse so decked the charioteer esteems a grace to him. Like these in grace the blood upon thy solid thighs did swim. O Menelaus, down by calves and ankles to the ground, for nothing decks a soldier so as doth an honoured wound. Yet fearing he had fared much worse, the hair stood up on end on Agamemnon when he saw so much black blood descend, and stiffened with the like dismay was Menelaus too. But seeing the arrows stale without, and that the head did go no further than it might be seen, he called his spirits again, which Agamemnon marking, not but thinking he was slain, he gripped his brother by the hand, and sighed as he would break, which sigh the whole host took from him, who thus at last did speak: "O dearest brother, Is't for this that thy death must be wrought? Wrought I this truce? For this hast thou the single combat fought for all the army of the Greeks? For this hath Iliad sworn, and trod all faith beneath their feet? Yet all this hath not worn the right we challenged out of force. This cannot render vain our stricken right hands sacred wine, nor all our offerings slain. For though Olympus be not quick in making good our ill, he will be sure, as he is slow, and sharply reprove his will. Their own hands shall be ministers of those plagues they despise, which shall their wives and children reach, and all their progenies. For both in mind and soul I know that there shall come a day when Iliad, Priam, all his powers, shall quite be worn away, when heaven-inhabiting Jove shall shake his fiery shield at all. For this one mischief, this I know the world cannot recall. But be all this, all my grief still for thee will be the same, dear brother, if thy life must here put out his royal flame. I shall to sandy Argos turn with infamy my face, and all the Greeks will call for home old Priam and his race will flame in glory. Helena, untouched, be still their prey, and thy bones in our enemies' earth our cursed fates shall lay. Thy sepulchre be trodden down, the pride of Troy desired insulting on it. Thus, oh thus, let Agamemnon's ire in all his acts be expiate, as now he carries home his idle army, empty ships, and leaves here overcome good Menelaus. When this rave breaks in their bated breath, then let the broad earth swallow me, and take me quick to death. Nor shall this ever chance, said he, and therefore be of cheer, lest all the army, led by you, your passions put in fear. The arrow fell in no such place a death could enter at. My girdle curates double here, and my most trusted plate objected all twixt me and death, the shaft scarce piercing one. Good brother, said the king, I wish it were no further gone, for then our best in medicine skilled shall ope and search the wound, applying balms to ease thy pains, and soon restore thee sound. This said, divine Talthybius he called, and bade him haste Machaon, Aesculapius' son, who of most men was graced with physic's sovereign remedies, to come and lend his hand to Menelaus, shot by one well skilled in the command of bow and arrows, one of Troy, or of the Lycian aid, who much hath glorified our foe, and us as much dismayed. He heard, and hasted instantly, and cast his eyes about the thickest squadrons of the Greeks to find Machaon out. He found him standing guarded well with well-armed men of Thrace, with whom he quickly joined, and said, Man of Apollo's race, haste, for the king of men commands to see a wound impressed in Menelaus, great in arms, by one instructed best in the art of archery of Troy or of the Lycian bands, that them with much renown adorns, us with dishonour brands. Machaon much was moved with this, who with the herald flew from troop to troop amongst the host, and soon they came in view of hurt Atrides, circled round with all the Grecian kings, who all gave way, and straight he draws the shaft, which forth he brings without the forks. The girdle then, plate curates off he plucks, and views the wound, when first from it the clottered blood he sucks. Then medicines, wondrously composed, the skilful leech applied, which loving Chiron taught his sire, he from his sire had tried. While these were thus employed to ease the Atrian martialist, the Trojans armed and charged the Greeks arm and resist. Then not asleep, nor mazed with fear, nor shifting off the blows, you could behold the king of men, but in full speed he goes to set a glorious fight on foot, and he examples this, with toiling like the worst on foot, who therefore did dismiss his brass-armed chariot and his steeds, with Ptolemaeus' son of Pieriades, their guide, the good Eurymedon. Yet said the king, attend with them, lest weariness should seize my limbs, surcharging with ordering troops so thick and vast as these. Eurymedon then reined his horse, that trotted neighing by, the king a footman, and so scours the squadrons orderly. Those of his swiftly mounted Greeks, that in their arms were fit, those he put on with cheerful words, and bade them not remit the least spark of their forward spirits, because the Trojans durst take these abhorred advantages, but let them do their worst, for they might be assured that Jove would patronize no lies, and that who, with breach of truce, would hurt their enemies, with vultures should be torn themselves, that they should raise their town, their wives and children at their breast, led vassals to their own. But such as he beheld hang off from that increasing fight, such would he bitterly rebuke, and with disgrace excite. Base Argives, blush ye not to stand as made for butts to darts? Why are ye thus discomfited, like hinds that have no hearts? Who, wearied with a long-run field, are instantly embossed, stand still, and in their beastly breasts is all their courage lost? And so stand you struck with amaze, nor dare to strike a stroke. Would ye the foe should nearer yet your dastard spleens provoke, even where on Neptune's foamy shore our navies lie in sight, to see if Jove will hold your hands and teach ye how to fight? Thus he, commanding, ranged the host, and passing many a band, he came to the Cretensian troops, where all did armed stand, about the martial Idomen, who bravely stood before in vanguard of his troops, and matched for strength a savage boar, Meriones his charioteer the rear guard bringing on, which seen to Atreus' son, to him it was a sight alone. And Idomen's confirmed mind with these kind words he seeks: O Idomen, I ever loved thyself past all the Greeks, in war or any work of peace, at table, everywhere. For when the best of Greece besides mix ever at our cheer, my good old ardent wine with small and our inferior mates, drink even that mixed wine measured too, thou drinkest without those rates. Our old wine neat, and evermore thy bowl stands full like mine, to drink still when and what thou wilt. Then rouse that heart of thine, and whatsoever heretofore thou hast assumed to be, this day be greater. To the king in this sort answered he: Atrides, whatever I seem the same at every part, this day shall show me at the full, and I will fit thy heart. But thou shouldst rather cheer the rest, and tell them they in right of all good war must offer blows, and should begin the fight, since Troy first brake the holy truce, and not endure these braves, to take wrong first, and then be dared to the revenge it craves, assuring them that Troy in fate must have the worst at last, since first and 'gainst a truce they hurt, where they should have embraced. This comfort and advice did fit Atrides' heart indeed, who still through new-raised swarms of men held his laborious speed, and came where both the Ajaces stood, whom like the last he found, armed, casqued, and ready for the fight. Behind them hid the ground a cloud of foot that seemed to smoke, and as a goatherd spies on some hill's top out of the sea a rainy vapor rise, driven by the breath of Zephyrus, which, though far off he rest, comes on as black as pitch, and brings a tempest in his breast. Whereat he, frighted, drives his herds apace into a den, so darkening earth with darts and shields showed these with all their men. This sight with like joy fired the king, who thus let forth the flame, in crying out to both the dukes, O you of equal name, I must not cheer, nay I disclaim all my command of you. Yourselves command with such free minds, and make your soldiers show, as you nor I led, but themselves. O would our father Jove, Minerva and the god of light, would all our bodies move, with such brave spirits as breathe in you, then Priam's lofty town, should soon be taken by our hands, forever overthrown. Then held he on to other troops, and Nestor next beheld the subtle Pelian orator ranged up and down the field, and battling his men-at-arms, and stirring all to blows, points every legion out his chief, and every chief he shows the forms and discipline of war, yet his commanders were all expert and renowned men. Great Pelagon was there, Alastor, manly Chromius, and Haemon worth a throne, and Bias that could armies lead. With these he first put on his horse troops with their chariots, his foot, of which he choosed many the best and ablest men, and which he ever used as rampire to his general power, he in the rear disposed. The slothful and the least of spirit he in the midst enclosed, that such a want of noble wills base need might force to stand. His horse troops that the vanguard had, he strictly did command to ride their horses temperately, to keep their ranks and shun confusion, lest their horsemanship and courage made them run, too much presumed on, much too far, and charging so alone, engage themselves in the enemy's strength, where many fight with one. Who his own chariot leaves to range, let him not freely go, but straight unhorse him with a lance, for 'tis much better so. And with this discipline, said he, this form, these minds, this trust, our ancestors have walls and towns laid levelled with the dust. Thus prompt, and long inured to arms, this old man did exhort, and this Atrides likewise took in wondrous cheerful sort, and said, O Father, would to heaven, that as thy mind remains in wonted vigour, so thy knees could undergo our pains. But age, that all men overcomes, hath made his prize on thee. Yet still I wish that some young man, grown old in mind, might be put in proportion with thy years, and thy mind young in age, be fitly answered with his youth, that still, where conflicts rage, and young men use to thirst for fame, thy brave exempling hand might double our young Grecian spirits, and grace our whole command. The old knight answered, I myself could wish, O Atreus' son, I were as young as when I slew brave Ereuthalion. But gods at all times give not all their gifts to mortal men. If then I had the strength of youth, I'd miss the counsels then that years now give me, and now years want that main strength of youth. Yet still my mind retains her strength, as you now said the sooth, and would be where that strength is used, affording counsel sage, to stir youth's minds up. 'Tis the grace and office of our age. Let younger sinews, men sprung up whole ages after me, and such as have strength use it, and as strong in honour be. The king, all this while comforted, arrived next where he found well-rode Menestheus, Pedas' son, stand still, environed round with his well-trained Athenian troops, and next to him he spied the wise Ulysses, deedless too, and all his bands beside of strong Cephallenians, for as yet the alarm had not been heard in all their quarters. Greece and Troy were then so newly stirred, and then first moved as they conceived, and they so looked about to see both hosts give proof of that they had yet cause to doubt. Atrides, seeing them stand so still and spend their eyes at gaze, began to chide. And why, said he, dissolve thus in amaze, thou son of Peteus, Jove-nursed king, and thou in wicked sleight, a cunning soldier, stand ye off? Expect ye that the fight should be by other men begun? 'Tis fit the foremost band should show you there, your first should front who first lifts up his hand. First you can hear, when I invite the princes to a feast, when first, most friendly, and at will, ye eat and drink the best. Yet in the fight, most willingly, 10 troops ye can behold take place before ye. Ithacus at this his brows did fold, and said, How hath thy violent tongue broke through thy set of teeth, to say that we are slack in fight, and to the field of death look others should enforce our way, when we were busied then, even when thou spakest against the foe to cheer and lead our men? But thy eyes shall be witnesses, if it content thy will, and that, as thou pretend'st, these cares do so affect thee still. The father of Telemachus, who I esteem so dear, and to whom as a legacy I leave my deeds done here, even with the foremost band of Troy hath his encounter dared, and therefore are thy speeches vain, and had been better spared. He, smiling, since he saw him moved, recalled his words, and said, Most generous Laertes' son, most wise of all our aid, I neither do accuse thy worth more than thyself may hold fit, that inferiors think not much, being slack, to be controlled, nor take I on me thy command, for well I know thy mind knows how sweet gentle counsels are, and that thou stand'st inclined, as I myself, for all our good. On then, if now we spake what hath displeased, another time we full amends will make, and gods grant that thy virtue e'er may prove so free and brave, that my reproofs may still be vain, and thy deservings grave. Thus parted they, and forth he went, when he did leaning find against his chariot, near his horse, him with the mighty mind, great Diomedes, Tydeus' son, and Sthenelus, the seed of Capaneus, whom the king seemed likewise out of deed. Thus cried he out to Diomed, O me, in what a fear the wise great warrior Tydeus' son stands gazing everywhere, for others to begin the fight? It was not Tydeus' use to be so daunted, whom his spirit would evermore produce before the foremost of his friends in these affairs of fright, as they report that have beheld him labor in a fight. For me, I never knew the man, nor in his presence came, but excellent above the rest he was in general fame. And one renowned exploit of his, I am assured is true, he came to the Mysian court without arms, and did sue at godlike Polynices' hands, to have some worthy aid to their designs that 'gainst the walls of sacred Thebes were laid. He was great Polynices' guest, and nobly entertained, and of the kind Mysian state what he requested gained, in mere consent. But when they should the same in act approve, by some sinister prodigies, held out to them by Jove, they were discouraged. Thence he went, and safely had his pass back to Aesopus' flood, renowned for bulrushes and grass. Yet once more their ambassador the Grecian peers addressed, Lord Tydeus, to Eteocles, to whom being given access, he found him feasting with a crew of Cadmeans in his hall, amongst whom, though an enemy, and only one to all yet he his challenge made at every martial feat, and easily foiled all, since with him Minerva was so great. The rank-rode Cadmeans, much incensed with their so foul disgrace, lodged ambuscados for their foe in some well-chosen place, by which he was to make return, twice 25 men, and 2 of them great captains too, the ambush did contain. The names of those 2 men of rule were Meon, Haemon's son, and Lycophontes, Keepfield called, the heir of Autophon, by all men honored like the gods, yet these and all their friends were sent to hell by Tydeus' hand, and had untimely ends. He, trusting to the aid of gods, revealed by augury, obeying which one chief he saved, and did his life apply to be the heavy messenger of all the others' deaths. And that sad message with his life to Meon he bequeaths. So brave a knight was Tydeus, of whom a son is sprung, inferior far in martial deeds, though higher in his tongue. All this Tydides silent heard, awed by the reverend king, which stung hot Sthenelus with wrath, who thus put forth his sting. Atrides, when thou knowest the truth, speak what thy knowledge is, and do not lie so, for I know, and I will brag in this, that we are far more able men than both our fathers were. We took the sevenfold ported Thebes, when yet we had not there so great a help as our fathers had, and fought beneath a wall, sacred to Mars, by help of Jove, and trusting to the fall of happy signs from other gods, by whom we took the town, untouched, our fathers perishing here by follies of their own, and therefore never more compare our fathers' worth with ours. Tydides frowned at this, and said, Suppress thine anger's powers, good friend, and hear why I refrained. Thou seest I am not moved against our general, since he did but what his place behoved, admonishing all Greeks to fight, for if Troy prove our prize, the honor and the joy is his, if here our ruin lies. The shame and grief for that as much is his in greatest kinds. As he then his charge, weighed we ours, which is our dauntless minds. Thus from his chariot, amply armed, he jumped down to the ground. The armor of the angry knight so horribly did sound, it might have made his bravest foe let fear take down his braves. And as when, with the west wind flaws, the sea thrusts up her waves, one after other, thick and high, upon the groaning shores, first in herself loud, but opposed with banks and rocks she roars, and all her back in bristles set, spits every way her foam. So after Diomed, instantly the field was overcome with thick impressions of the Greeks, and all the noise that grew, ordering and cheering up their men, from only leaders flew. The rest went silently away, you could not hear a voice, nor would have thought in all their breasts they had one in their choice. Their silence uttering their awe of them that them controlled, which made each man keep right his arms, march, fight still where he should. The Trojans, like a sort of ewes penned in a rich man's fold, close at his door till all be milked, and never bawing hold, hearing the bleating of their lambs, did all their wide host fill with shouts and clamours, nor observed one voice, one bawing still, but showed mixed tongues from many a land of men called to their aid. Rude Mars had the ordering of their spirits, of Greeks the learned made. But terror followed both the hosts, and flight, and furious strife the sister, and the mate of Mars that spoiled of human life. And never is her rage at rest, at first she is but small, yet after, but a little fed, she grows so vast and tall, that while her feet moved here in earth, her forehead is in heaven. And this was she that made even then both hosts so deadly given. Through every troop she stalked, and stirred rough sighs up as she went. But when in one field both the foes her fury did content, and both came under reach of darts, then darts and shields opposed to darts and shields. Strength answered strength, then swords and targets closed. With swords and targets, both with pikes, and then did tumult rise up to her height, then conquerors' boasts mixed with the conquered's cries. Earth flowed with blood, and as from hills rain waters headlong fall, that always eat huge ruts, which met in one bed fill of all, with such a confluence of streams, that on the mountain grounds, far off, in frightened shepherds' ears, the bustling noise rebounds. So grew their conflicts, and so showed their scuffling to the ear, with flight and clamour still commixed, and all effects of fear. And first renowned Antilochus slew, fighting in the face of all Achaea's foremost bands, with an undaunted grace. Echepolus Thaliciades, he was an armed man, whom on his hair-plumed helmet's crest the dart first smote, then ran into his forehead, and there stuck, the steel pile making way quite through his skull. A hasty night shut up his latest day. His fall was like a fight-raced tower, like which lying there dispread King Eliphenor, who was son to Chalcodon, and led the valiant Abonts, covetous that he might first possess his arms, laid hands upon his feet, and hauled him from the press of darts and javelins hurled at him. The action of the king, when great in heart Agenor saw, he made his javelin sing to the other's labour, and along as he the trunk did rest, his side, at which he bore his shield, in bowing of his breast, lay naked, and received the lance, that made him lose his hold and life together, which in hope of that he lost, he sold. But for his sake the fight grew fierce, the Trojans and their foes, like wolves on one another rushed, and man for man it goes. The next of name that served his fate, great Ajax Telamon, preferred so sadly, he was heir to old Anthemion, and decked with all the flower of youth, the fruit of which yet fled, before the honoured nuptial torch could light him to his bed. His name was Simoeisius, for some few years before, his mother walking down the hill of Ida by the shore of silver Simois to see her parents' flocks, with them she, feeling suddenly the pains of childbirth, by the stream of that bright river brought him forth, and so of Simois they called him Simoeisius. Sweet was that birth of his to his kind parents, and his growth did all their care employ, and yet those rites of piety that should have been his joy to pay their honoured years again in as affectionate sort, he could not graciously perform, his sweet life was so short. Cut off with mighty Ajax's lance, for as his spirit put on, he strook him at his breast right pap, quite through his shoulder bone, and in the dust of earth he fell, that was the fruitful soil of his friends' hopes, but where he sowed he buried all his toil. And as a poplar shot aloft, set by a riverside, in moist edge of a mighty fen, his head in curls implied, but all his body plain and smooth, to which a wheelwright puts the sharp edge of his shining axe, and his soft timber cuts from his in native root, in hope to hew out of his bowl the fellifs, or out parts of a wheel, that compass in the whole, to serve some goodly chariot, but being big and sad, and to be hauled home through the bogs, the useful hope he had sticks there, and there the goodly plant lies withering out his grace. So lay by Jove-bred Ajax's hand Anthemian's forward race, nor could through that vast fen of toils be drawn to serve the ends intended by his body's powers, nor cheered his aged friends. But now the gay-armed Antiphus, a son of Priam, threw his lance at Ajax through the prease, which went by him and flew on Lucas, wise Ulysses' friend. His groin it smote, as fain he would have drawn into his spoil the carcass of the slain, by which he fell, and that by him it vexed Ulysses' heart, who thrust into the face of fight, well armed at every part, came close, and looked about to find an object worth his lance, which when the Trojans saw him shake, and he so near advance, all shrunk, he threw, and forth it shined, nor fell but where it felled. His friend's grief gave it angry power, and deadly way it held upon Democoon, who was sprung of Priam's wanton force, came from Abydos, and was made the master of his horse. Through both his temples struck the dart, the wood of one side shewed, the pile out of the other looked, and so the earth he strewed, with much sound of his weighty arms. Then back the foremost went, even Hector yielded, then the Greeks gave worthy clamours vent. Effecting then their first dumb powers, some drew the dead and spoiled, some followed, that in open fight Troy might confess it foiled. Apollo, angry at the sight, from top of Ilion cried, "Turn, head, ye well-rowed peers of Troy, feed not the Grecians' pride. They are not charmed against your points, of steel nor iron framed, nor fights the fair-haired Thetis' son, but sits at fleet inflamed. So spake the dreadful god from Troy, the Greeks, Jove's noblest seed, encouraged to keep on the chase, and where fit spirit did need, she gave it, marching in the midst. Then flew the fatal hour back on Diores in return of Ilion's sunburned power. Diores Amaryncetes, whose right leg's ankle bone, and both the sinews with a sharp and handful charging stone, Pyrrhus Imbrasides did break, that led the Thracian bands, and came from Enos, down he fell, and up he held his hands to his loved friends, his spirit winged to fly out of his breast, with which not satisfied, again Imbrasides addressed his javelin at him, and so ripped his navel, that the wound, as endlessly it shut his eyes, so opened, on the ground it poured his entrails. As his foe went, then sufficed away, Thoas Aetolius threw a dart, that did his pile convey, above his nipple through his lungs, when quitting his stern part, he closed with him, and from his breast first drawing out his dart, his sword flew in, and by the midst it wiped his belly out. So took his life, but left his arms, his friends so flocked about, and thrust forth lances of such length before their slaughtered king, which though their foe were big and strong, and often brake the ring, forged of their lances, yet enforced, he left the affected prize. The Frasians and Epean dukes laid close with closed eyes, by either other drowned in dust, and round about the plain, all hid with slaughtered carcasses, yet still did hotly reign the martial planet, whose effects had any eye beheld, free and unwounded, and were led by Pallas through the field. To keep off javelins and suggest the least fault could be found, he could not reprehend the fight, so many strewed the ground. End of the 4th book.